Good day, everyone. Today we will be having our panel discussion that is all about the implementation of death penalty in the Philippines. So our discussion is composed of four parts: the introduction, the sides of those who agreed and disagreed, those who will provide the cons and pros of this chosen topic, the whole summary of this talk. Let us now start with the introduction with the help of Alexa to enlighten us what exactly is death penalty. She will give us a little background and history of it in our own country.
The death penalty is a capital punishment or execution served to someone legally for a heinous crime. For years, the Philippines put people to death, particularly in cases of so-called heinous crimes. But President Gloria Macapagal Arroyo, under pressure from the Catholic Church, abolished the death penalty in 2006. Human rights opposes the death penalty in all circumstances because it is inherently cruel and irreversible.
Thank you, Alexa, for that information. Now let us proceed to hear facts and elaboration of stand of each member. Let us start with the side of those who agreed, namely Graciel, Isa, Lauren, and Ron. All members are also allowed to ask questions or to clarify something after every member finishes his or her side. You guys can now begin.
I agree to death penalty to be legalized for people with crimes punishable by death to be put to death. I agree because I believe people who just this kind of crimes are afraid of death. Death penalty will lessen the crimes such as murder, mass murder, illicit rape, child abuse, terrorism, drug trafficking, drug possession, and drug dealing. More crimes, crimes against humanity, recidivism, aggravated robbery, brutality, carrying, and kidnapping. It will also lessen the corruption because stealing funds of the government can be charged by death penalty if proven guilty, and that depends on the country. We have a major problem against drugs, and we can't stop drug possessors by just simply talking to them and filing cases against them with a sentence of life imprisonment. Sexual abuse could also affect the mental health that could lead to depression and could cause death. Criminals such as murderers kill other people because they are afraid of death itself.
In my opinion, death penalty should be applied in our country. It is a government-sanctioned practice where the is put into death by the state as punishment for a crime. It is based on how serious the crime was. Death penalty should be petitioned in the view of the fact that being in prison isn't enough for those who already sell their soul to their evildoers. It should be implemented to stop such big crimes like homicide, genocide, torture, rape, animal abuse, molestation, manslaughter, and child abuse. Historically, the death penalty was widely used for rape, particularly against black defendants with white victims. Executing someone permanently stopped the worst criminals and means we can all be safer for its decrease their crime rate.
For me, we should definitely have death penalty in our country because it gives closure to the victims' families who have suffered so much. Some family members of crime victims may take years or decades to recover from the shock of and loss of a loved one. Some may never recover. One of the things that helps hasten this recovery is to achieve some kind of closure. Life in prison just means the criminal is still around to hunt the victim. A death sentence brings finality to a horrible chapter in the lives of his family members.
Ron, I'm going to ask you a question since you agreed. If death penalty was back, what's the purpose of it if innocent people are involved?
Julia, technology have given us advantages to look for crimes using DNA, fingerprint scanners, CCTV, and other things modern scientists have done up until this point.
Thank you so much, Ron, for answering my question. You guys can now proceed.
Uh,
Lauren.
I totally agree because there are bad people who should know that they can die for what they do, which cause them to stop. But in my opinion, death penalty should not be abused. The power to legally kill people because the Philippines has made a mistake in the death penalty. At least 4% of people died due to death execution.
Thank you for expressing your thoughts, Graciel, Isa, Ron, and Lauren. Now let us move on with the members who disagreed and are against with the implementation of death penalty, namely Alexa, Julia, and including me. As I said earlier, all members are still allowed to ask questions or to clarify something after every member finishes his or her side, so we will begin now.
I am against death penalty as a way to serve justice for crimes. If the reason why 106 countries, which is the majority of the world, have abolished the death penalty in law, is it because it does not work, then why would Philippines implement it? If this law failed twice in our country, then what is our assurance that it would work on the third try?
For me, I totally disagree with the implementation of death penalty once again in the Philippines. If the administration body wants to revive death penalty, they need to consider first fixing our justice system that most of the time is undeniably deemed as biased and broken. Well, I refuse to believe that death penalty will deter or lessen the crime and could push people to refrain from committing heinous acts because the government itself depicts an immoral image to the Filipinos. According to some credible sources and articles I have read, and perhaps you might as well are familiar with these cases, there are a lot of politicians or people who work for government that is proved beyond the doubt that they committed several crimes such as plunder and drug-related cases. Yet they only spent few years in jail, then have been released and surprisingly pardoned, possibly because of their dominance and connection with the gullible and easily persuaded officials who hold their cases. Now let us have a comparison between these corrupt politicians and unfortunate people who were wrongfully convicted and mostly framed up. Some of them even was sentenced to life imprisonment. And let me provide you a mirror case to all of that proves the injustice in our own country. So the Chiang murder case was a trial regarding in the incident that happened back in July 16, 1997 that took place in Cebu. They accused a man named Paco Laranaga, who they believe was the most prominent convict among the other suspects, even though he wasn't in the same place where the rape slay occurred, and he had 40 witnesses with him who justified that he is indeed innocent. So the Cheong family actually was rumored that they are connected with the drug trafficking business and made up the murder to cause some complications and avoid evoking that they indeed sell drugs, which shows that Paco Laranaga was definitely framed up. Paco remains in prison up until today because he was convicted with a crime he did not even committed, and he is completely deprived of freedom. What exactly happened with Paco Laranaga just blatantly exudes our justice system is immensely messed up. What more if we impose that penalty in the Philippines?
May I clarify and ask something, Shania? Do you think that sentence is not the best way for criminals to compensate for whatever the cruel crime they had committed?
All right, Isa, for me, I don't think it is the best way of compensation because that is only the easiest form of escape from whatever heinous crimes that they had committed. Well, personally, for me, life sentence is much more worse than a death sentence. Let those proved criminals suffer a lifetime till their.
You guys can now continue.
I think that penalty isn't the best solution for our country. During Esperanto's administration, 7 countries were put to death, and at least one of them was retained and found unjustly killed. Killing 50% wrongful execution rate according to the ombudsman. The idea that the death penalty will reach the culture of drug is simply wrong. The resumption of execution will not make the Philippines of problems associated with drug or death or crime. Here in prison, a convict can be later exonerated. We can prosecute him. We can still correct the mistake. In capital punishment, we cannot rectify the error once the convict has been put to death. The penalty does not serve any purpose that is not already being served by the punishment of life in prison. If that penalty was back, the purpose of it, if people are involved.
Now we are done hearing the side of both who agreed and disagreed. Let us proceed to tackle and provide you the pros and cons of applying death penalty, specifically here in the Philippines. Let us first begin with the members who will be giving the pros, namely Gabriel, Iza, Ron, and Lauren.
Death penalty is given to those who are proven guilty, not just because the court wants to. They give and spend time just to justify if the convict is guilty of something. It is also considered as a form of justice. Death penalty is not just by the court to the one decide if the convict would be sentenced to death. It's the victim or relative of the victim who filed the said case. The death penalty is not just given by a sudden decision. Some accused gives or offers settlements such as blood money or transfer of property as an offering. But the ones to decide is the victim or the one who filed the case if they accept it as an offering. Death penalty is widely used for cases of rape and murder, and in some cases of sentencing some convicts to death, but proven not guilty after the execution happens, of the lack of time of the convict's defense counsel. Defense counsel of the convict and the defender has a lot of time to find evidences that the accused is not guilty of the said case. Before the sentence will be given, a lot of trials will happen. Death penalty trials are more longer and time consuming than non-capital trials. It is 4 times longer than capital trials. So the defense counsel of the accused has a lot of time to find evidence for the convict they are defending. Death penalty is also very costly because the accused is declared as guilty. The prosecution will be in need of forensic evidences, the mental health of the accused, and the background and life of the defendant. Death penalty is given with strong evidences that the accused is guilty of the crime he had committed before declaring. The prosecution will release amounts of money just to find evidence to prove that the accused is guilty. If the accused is really not guilty of the crime, uh, evidences that he is innocent will show with no expenses. For the day of death penalty to be applied, there is one last trial that is supposed to happen, and this is the last hearing that the convict is not guilty that should be proven. This is the time that is important that you will need to prove that the convict is not guilty. Time is very important.
You should only execute those who most deserve it, and not randomly. Refiner death penalties.
Liza, nakamute ka.
You should only execute those who most deserve it, and not randomly. Refine our death penalty statutes and review the sentence of everyone on death row. Release into general population those who don't really deserve to die. The rest would execute the worst first. Studies of the death penalty have reached various conclusions about its effectiveness in deterring crime. That the majority of studies that track or effects over many years and across states or countries find a deterrent effect. Indeed, other recent investigations using a variety of sample and statistical methods consistently demonstrate a strong link between executions and reduced murder rates. In short, capital punishment or death penalty does in fact save lives, regardless of future benefits. We justify punishment because it's deserved. Let the punishment fit the crime. The law must be served properly and fairly. The guilty must be punished.
Another pros of death penalty is that a prisoner, parole, or escapist can give criminals another chance to kill. Perhaps the biggest reason to keep the death penalty is to prevent the crime from happening again. The parole system nowadays is a joke. Does it make sense to anyone outside the legal system to have multiple life sentences, plus 20 years or other gibberish? Even if criminal is sentenced to life without possibility of parole, he still has a chance to kill while in prison, or even worse, escape and go on a crime or murder spree.
The positive effect of death penalty is determined criminals from committing serious crime. Let us know that we people need to follow the rules so no one can get hurt, get killed from doing crimes, and to use our brains for our movement.
Thank you for giving us some example of pros and more likely the advantages of death penalty. Now, Alexa, Julia, and including me will provide you some cons of the death penalty.
So I have here 3 cons of death penalty. Number 1, death penalty is anti-poor. Poor inmates are more likely to get a death penalty more than the richer inmates. Why? Because richer inmates have enough resources to continuously defend themselves in court compared to the poor inmates. That is anti-poor and a display of classism. We all know our system favors the rich. Back in 2004, the Free Legal Assistance Group, or known as FLAG, did a survey of 890 death row inmates. Among other things, FLAG found that 79% of death row inmates did not reach college, and 63% were previously employed in blue-collar work in sectors like agriculture, transport, and construction.
So I will provide 2 cons of death penalty. The first one is that the judicial system is completely bound to commit mistakes. As I have said earlier, that there are innumerable amount of people that have absolutely nothing to do with the crimes they are convicted into. So if we have the penalty, it will petrify a lot of us due to the fact that being mistakenly accused could cause you to lose your life. Also, the other disadvantage of death penalty in the Philippines is that the Philippines is an anti-poor country and lacks sympathy towards, especially when it comes to justice. The defenseless people will commonly be the target of execution because obviously they have no power at all, while the superior and wealthy people can easily escape and can avoid being in the death row, even though their cases is much worse than those poor ones. In conclusion, death penalty is usually futile if we keep on letting these powerful people be above the law. Losing one's innocent life is evitable if we let the death penalty be abolished and disregarded. We shall never condone how justice works and treats other kinds of people unfairly.
There are 2 cons that I will say. The first one is the idea that death penalty will make the concept of justice simply wrong. The resumption of execution will not be the of problems associated with drug or deter crime. It is ineffective punishment is never the solution. The Philippines attempts to introduce it are clearly unlawful. The Philippines attempts to introduce it. This will just earn the country as one of the few countries to revive its horrific use. The second is it is an old-fashioned and ignorant solution. America's image would be improved in places like Europe if the death penalty were abolished. The places where execution happen regularly include repressive regimes like Iran, Yemen, and Saudi Arabia.
Now we are done with providing the pros and cons of death penalty. We will now summarize our panel discussion. Death penalty is one of the most controversial topics people constantly argue about. We decided to choose this topic for us to have and gain some knowledge from one another we had never yet encountered, and to express our individual opinions regarding death penalty. Each member elaborated their side and shared their insights. We also prepared a lot of credible and provided the advantages and advantage or simply the pros and cons of death penalty. So that's all for our group discussion. Thank you for participating and listening. We all hope that you find this discussion educational, logical, and useful. Have a great day.